This is me absolutely cleaning house in the MMA cage. This is me strung out on dope and at my lowest point. This is me in and out of jail. And this is me now, clean, redeemed, and with my beautiful family. Guys, I do want to say real quick that talking about myself is not what I want to do with this channel, but I do want to be 100% real with my audience, so I'm going to lay it all out, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so we could do this YouTube journey thing together. And just maybe it'll help somebody out there going through similar struggles. Let's go. I was born in the Ukraine. I moved to the US when I was 3 in 96. And let me just say, growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s was absolutely peak childhood experience. I did have a little bit of culture shock. I had to learn the ropes and adjust a little bit. Like, Чебурашка and Ну Погоди were not cool.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I had a pretty normal upbringing. My mom and dad put a lot into me, especially my mom. A lot of that has to do with the fact that her dad was a violent alcoholic, and there was all kinds of horrific things that happened in her childhood, like her and her siblings hiding in the attic while her dad is chasing her mom around with an axe. So she did her best to shield me from that and was very upset by the turns that my life ended up taking. My dad was a very typical post-Soviet type of man. He worked a lot, and he didn't talk about his emotions. He buried them deep down within himself. No, my dad was great. I love my dad to death. Church was an absolutely huge part of my childhood, and it ended up affecting me and my thinking for the rest of my life, as it does for most Russian Ukrainian kids. And it's a very specific brand of church. It very much so reflected the dreary, heavy, existentially crushing weight of the Soviet Union. And I spent my childhood thinking that I was going to hell. And I had existential dread constantly. But on the other hand, I was an extremely rebellious kid. I wasn't a bad kid. Well, no, I was a badass little kid. And a lot of that has to do with a lack of direction or purpose. And really, that wouldn't come fully until much later when I started training and fighting MMA, a sport that captivated me mind, body, and spirit, which we'll get to later on in the video. It wasn't long into my 10th grade year where I tried my first joint, and it was given to me by my uncle, the same uncle that would later give me more hardcore and addictive substances. Now, I don't hold a lot of bitterness, or I try not to, but it blows my mind that somebody can be addicted to a substance and give that same substance to their family member, especially a young kid. But I was more than willing at the time, and it was the worst possible thing that could have happened to 14-year-old me. Of course, I thought that it expanded my mind and that it made me creative. But for a kid that already had behavioral problems and no purpose or really identity, it was the worst thing that could happen. And really, it became my identity.
Let's go smoke a joint, man.
Now, I did have a great time in high school. I had plenty of great friends. I dated girls, but it was just a party to me. And I wasn't a stupid kid, just a lost kid. When it comes to the Ukrainian and Russian community in the US, we're definitely overrepresented when it comes to crime, drug addiction, and alcoholism. It's an unflattering thing to say, but it's just true. It is what it is. And I was definitely torn between these two worlds, my American friends and then my Russian and Ukrainian friends, who aren't all drug addicts or criminals, but the drug addict or criminal friends that I had in my life were Russian or Ukrainian. And the following year in high school was when I committed my first crime. And me and some of my friends ended up getting extremely wasted, stealing a car, and deciding it was a good idea to drive to Myrtle Beach. Of course, I was caught less than a week later. I did under a month in juvie, and my parents were absolutely horrified. It was also in my 11th grade year where I was introduced to opioids, to pills, and the problem was instantly recognizable. I felt the anxiety seep out of my body to be replaced with confidence. I had this euphoria coursing through me, and instantly opioids had a hold on me, even though it would take quite some time before it became extremely bad. But I wouldn't graduate high school until I had a major wake-up call that I wish really had more of an effect on me than it did. But my best friend since junior high, his name was Vlad. At one point when I was out of town, I get a call from my mom at roughly 5:30 in the morning. And she calls me with some of the most devastating, life-shattering news that I've ever received. And I answer the phone and she says 3 words. She says, Dima Vlad Pomer, which means Dimitri Vlad died. And Vlad was my absolute best friend that I've ever had. We were inseparable, and the news absolutely crushed me. And what happened was, he went to play basketball with some of his friends, and there was another group of guys there, and Vlad challenged them to a basketball game. And Vlad, just being the type of guy he was, he would always talk lighthearted shit, right? I mean, he would joke around with these little jabs with you, and it's just kind of the way he was. And he also knew how to fight, so he wasn't afraid to cross lines. But he ended up telling one of these guys that if we beat you in this basketball game, your girls come home with us, which I know is majorly crossing the line. So they end up getting into a fight, and Vlad starts beating the shit out of him and gets on top, mounts him, starts beating him up on the ground. And the guy who's getting beat up, his friend runs behind Vlad and sticks a knife into his neck. Cuts through his jugular, cuts through everything. And what kills me the most is everybody disperses. Everybody runs away. And later on in the police report, we find out that Vlad crawled for roughly 150 yards to a nearby house trying to get help, but he collapsed in their driveway and bled out. That absolutely killed me for multiple reasons. I knew that I would have been there if I was in town. I realized at that moment that my life is extremely fragile and I could be gone from this life just like that, and that we truly weren't as gangster as we thought we were. Now, obviously, this emotional state doesn't last very long for me because along with me graduating high school, I graduate from pills to heroin. I also catch a charge in Atlanta that I would have to serve 9 months in prison for, and also get into various extremely dangerous and sticky situations where I'm robbed at gunpoint, pistol whipped, and other easily avoidable close calls because I'm an idiot. And I'm finally forced to go to rehab. But on the other hand, I'm just social enough and just charismatic enough to maintain a relationship with the girl who's never smoked a cigarette and never drank in her life. She was a church girl that believed in me and who is now my wife today. And I am beyond blessed that she stayed with me and chose to love me through the shit that I put her through. Because if it wasn't for her, I probably would have died. Now, extremely arrogantly, I take out the fact that I'm using again on God. I tell myself and everybody that will listen that there is no way there's a God because I prayed and begged him for help, and he didn't help me. Therefore, he must not exist. And I attempt to stay clean on sheer resentment and ill-conceived determination. And the problem is, it worked, which I wish it didn't, and I dealt with the deeper-seated issues much earlier. But that's now in the past. It worked. And when I got out of rehab, I did my 9-month prison bid, and I stayed clean for a long time. Roughly 6 years without heroin use. Now, I'm very thankful for this period in my life because I'm still very young and I have time to build my life. And despite the fact that I'm a little resentful shit, God helps me. I have kids, I buy a house, my business flourishes, and I start doing the thing that gives me structure and consistency for these 6 years. And that is started training and fighting MMA. Now, I will say, MMA is the most beautiful sport, and many people view it as a meathead type sport, but they couldn't be more wrong. It's called martial arts for a reason. It is a sport of expression. Understanding the complexities of an opponent, preparing for months on end, and then going to war with him is so fulfilling. I began training 5 to 6 days a week, sometimes 2 times a day. I would run 7 miles 4 times a week. I had the absolute best coaches. Dan Henderson, All-American Pride champion. His ex-coach was my coach at the time, Brian Harper. My head coach was Jimmy Fowler, who is an absolute genius mastermind of the fight game. And my training partners were top tier. UFC fighters like Justin Scoggins, Hector Urbina, along with an array of just absolute animals that were around my weight division that I trained with all the time. Now, I do say that I have no regrets, but it does pain me deeply that I didn't do the proper work to heal the wounds that led to my addiction, because I inevitably would watch everything that I built during this time crash and burn. One of the main things that led to my crash and burn was my arrogance and unrepentedness. All addicts are told that it is absolutely detrimental to keep any former acquaintances in our lives. But one acquaintance that I did have in my life was, not to incriminate myself, an plug. He was an plug that was giving to me to sell wholesale. And I just couldn't say no to the money because I thought I had everything under control. After all, I've been clean for so much time. And it was that specific arrogance and inability to humble myself which led to my downfall. One night, me and some of my training partners had a fight in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And as per gym ritual, after the fights, we go to a local bar. While we're chilling at this bar, alcohol not being my drug of choice, I have this insidious demonic voice in the back of my head, an all too familiar voice that I'm sure some of you guys may have heard before. And it tells me, you've been clean for so long, you're a different person now, you're stronger, you can keep it together. What's the chances of you destroying everything you've built? And sure enough, the following week, a friend of mine finds me some Lortabs, I eat them, and the following week, I'm back in the hood looking for dope. And my life starts crumbling piece by piece. In a few months, I'm in no condition to train. No doubt I would have made it to the UFC. I could have easily went pro at the time. I was an extremely talented fighter, very athletic, undefeated amateur record, and I threw it all away. I threw away my dream that was coming together in front of my eyes. My wife despised me for it. I'm shocked that she stayed with me. She stayed because of the kid. Well, no, she stayed because she loved me. But she was so strong during that time. That's when the overdoses started. One brutal overdose after another. One night, my wife wakes up at 2 a.m. She hears the faucet running. Doesn't think anything of it. Thinks I'm getting some water or whatever. Goes back to sleep. A few minutes later, hears the faucet again and runs out to the kitchen. And I'm headfirst in the sink. And she freaks out and pulls me out. And I'm cold to the touch, rigid, blue. I collapse to the ground. She absolutely panics. This traumatized her deeply. She calls the ambulance. The ambulance take another 11 minutes to get there. Take multiple Narcans to resuscitate me. So when I say God's hand was on my life and he saved me, I mean that. That's not just a phrase that I throw around. At this point, I also nod out while driving, total my car into a tree. We use all the resources we have as a family to buy another car. I total that car a month later. I become an absolute shell of who I was, and my addiction reaches lows that I never thought were possible. I despised myself. I completely lost all confidence. I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. And for 2.5 to 3 years, I kept this vicious cycle going, humiliating myself and my family, and would say phrases like, I just need to find the right Carl Jung book. I need to confront my shadow. All this stupid, retarded shit. It took many close encounters with death for me to finally humble myself to the point where I went to rehab. And when I went to rehab this time, I knew that my entire life, my family, the house, everything was hanging on a thread. And I made a decision to humble myself completely. Everything I thought I knew, I had to completely throw it in the garbage. To the point where every piece of advice that I was given, I took it. And one of those pieces of advice are extremely cliche. They tell every addict you have to go to AA meetings. Preferably 90 meetings in 90 days, and then at least once or twice a week for the rest of your life. And when I started ignoring what Dima thought and started listening, I was pleasantly shocked. In these AA meetings, I met some of the most profoundly inspirational, amazing people, and they taught me that my whole worldview is flawed. I would have to throw away every part of myself, all my thinking, all my desires, all my ambitions into the fire, into the crucible, and be burned down to ash. And that's what I did. And now it's been many years since I've used dope, and there are many struggles in my life, but I'll never go back to thinking that I have something figured out. So that's my story, and that's who I am. I used to think that I was a unique case, but really there are so many people like me, broken, lost, or confused, and just cover it with ego and arrogance. And now that I have some hard-earned stability and clarity in this life, I realize how absolutely blessed I am. That I'm so grateful that I'm still alive. I'm so grateful that I have a family that loves me to death. I'm so grateful for second chances, for the ability just to get online and communicate my story to the world, and to be able to explore this life authentically. And I'm also grateful for a unique perspective. Now, although I'm too old to become a UFC fighter now, there's so much left to build and explore. And this is what my YouTube channel is for. It's for an authentic deep dive into faith, into different perspectives, different philosophies, and just my honest take and deep dive into current events. And I want nothing more than people that understand me, see my journey, and come on this journey with me. And that's what I'm going to be doing. Guys, I know I've been rambling for a bit, but I do appreciate every single person who watches my videos. If there's anything that touched you about my story, I'm not going to keep talking about myself in the other videos. So if there's anything you want to ask me down in the comments. If this connected to you in any way, hit that like button. And if you're into exploration of religion, philosophy, and different topics like this, hit that subscribe button, join the community. And as always, I love you guys, God bless, and I'll see you next time on Dima Talks.